they get a little irritated if you don't accept something
Oh,
sometimes.
yes.
I mean, they are very touchy,
Mhm.
very touchy. So that's one thing I do, and of course I have become associated with Constable Hall since I got rid of the business, because I couldn't do it before, I just didn't have the time.
Mhm.
That's 24 hours a day then. And been trying to bring it back into the history of the area and get it developed so that people understand this whole North Country was part of the original Macomb Purchase, and all this is tied together, and Constable Hall was kind of the center of the outcropping of all the things that have happened since then. I realize a lot of the area had people in it before William came up here and started to try and develop it, but still, it goes back to that one point of where the greatest part of the development came through the Constable Hall area.
Mhm.
And I've been working on that, and I've had some very fine experiences meeting the different historians of these local towns, and don't think they aren't dedicated now. You get,
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
oh, they are something.
The Macomb Purchase, would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, the Macomb Purchase was a tremendous land deal, there's no question about it. William Constable, Alexander Macomb, and Daniel McCormick bought approximately, it's between 3.5 and 4 million acres of the state of New York, which really is about 1/10 of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And they realized the potential of this area. Of course, there were already, the Indians were here and other people had been through here, but nobody had actually looked the thing over and decided to purchase it. So they purchased it from the state. They paid around, I think it was 25 pence an acre at that time, which is around 13 or 14 cents an acre in good old U.S. change. And then, of course, once they got into this, they bought it from the state. They did not buy it from the Indians. A lot of people think that they bought it from the Indians. They didn't. They bought it from the state of New York. That's what makes the state liable for any claims that the Indians are having against the area now.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with this land, they were interested in developing it. I'll digress a minute as to William Constable's status. William was considered one of the finest merchants in New York City. He was a merchant. He traded with the British in the West Indies, and as a matter of fact, he was put in prison once for dealing with the enemy at the time of the proclamation that we kind of didn't like England anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the Patriots thought he was dealing under the cuff with the British armies down there, supplying food and so forth, so they put him in jail. But he was only in one day and he was out. But this is one of the things that happened because the Constitution had not been signed. All we had was the Declaration of Independence. Mm-hmm. So all these merchants were still business as usual because all they had was the Declaration. They didn't have the Constitution to work with. And I think very many people don't understand that either, that they think that 1776 was the day that we were actually formed. All we did was declare our independence from England. We didn't have a constitution or a government to work with. Each state was separate. So we ran into a little trouble there. But to get development in this area, they looked at the European market. That was one of the major things. Now, in relationship to William, they were tremendous speculators, and it's hard to believe when you read history that the chances they took. He had at one time 300,000 acres in the Genesee country that he had a patent on, but he sold that before he had a chance to develop it. Then he had 1 million acres on the Penobscot River in Massachusetts, which he had you might say, a right on, but he never actually fulfilled it because he never came to full terms with the government of Massachusetts. But he then went into Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Kentucky, and Georgia. And this was all the same time that he was working with the Macomb Purchase, so the man was spread all over the country.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And going to Europe was the major thing to get people to come over here, and he was very responsible of getting Lloyd de Schmo interested in it. And we started the great village of Casterland, which was to be the utopia for the French aristocracy at the time of the Revolution to come over here and set up the most beautiful form of life that they could imagine. And of course the first ones that arrived here and looked at the wilderness, I think they became quite discouraged because it didn't last very long, and there was a lot of hanky-panky and dealings to bring these people over here, and there was a lot of money wasted and so forth. And it finally fell through. But land dealings was the greatest part of it. Dr. John settled, came over from Montreal and settled in the Schenectady area.
Well, this was William's son?
This was William's father.
William's father, okay.
And there's a lot of history around the Schenectady area, but then William moved to New York. Well, first of all, he went to Philadelphia, and that's where he got his start, really, as a merchant, was in Philadelphia. But he realized that New York would be the seacoast port of the East Coast, and he transferred to New York. And of course, New York was the port at that time. Everything came into the East Coast back into New York City. So that's where he set up his mercantile business, and he was with several different people, Rucker and Company, and was in the mercantile business. But then his land thing took over when they got into the home purchase, and they really went into land speculation to the full degree. And after buying it, that's when he came up, and he never actually saw his purchase. He got as far as, which was Fort Stanwix, and it's Rome today. And it took him 3 months to get that far, and he turned and went back. But his son William is the one who came up here, picked a spot for Constable Hall, and started building it. It was started in 1810, finished in 1819. He died in 1821 from an injury received when they were laying the front portico, which is a solid block of limestone, weighs somewhere around 10 or 11 ton. And it was going to damage one of his oak trees, which he was quite choice of, and they were bringing it around. So he had it moved, and when it did, it fell, crushed one of his legs, and he died in 21. His wife, he married Eliza McVicker, and his wife stayed on for 42 years after his death. And this is where we bring in Hezekiah Pierpont, because he married William Constable's daughter. Now this is the first, I call them William I and William II to separate them. William I was the son of Dr. John, and William II was the son of William I. William II is the landman, and William I is the merchant.
No, William I is the one who built the hall, though.
No, William II built the hall.
William II built the hall.
Yeah, the son. And this is where Hezekiah Pierpont came in, because he was named executor for the estate of William II when he died. And through that, he picked up a lot of the holdings, and he also did a lot of purchasing from William before that. So that the family was tied into the Pierponts quite heavily. Of course, we have Pierpont Manor right here down the road, not too far from Watertown. And William Constable Pierpont, the son of Hezekiah, is the one that built the house down there. In his land dealings, it's amazing to me that they were as close as they could be on acreage and so forth. And like the Castellan Company, I think they were supposed to have something like 300,000 or 400,000 acres, and they ended up with 2, and they had to go back and resurvey it. So it was a very interesting period. Loretta Chameau, of course, came over here, and they were very good friends. We have 5 numbered letters, quite a few letters from Loretta Chameau to William. I have letters from Chosanis and letters from Alexander McComb. Not too many of them. There's a lot of them in the New York Public Library. The total history is very well saved down there. They have truckloads of stuff. I've never seen much of it, but people have gone down there, and they tell me that you could spend a week and you'll begin to read half of it because the records are there. Well, the hall was kept right straight through, and then at Eliza's death, I might put a little bit of color in here. The night before Christmas, written by Clement Moore, was practically written for Constable Hall. And the throwing open the blinds, and throwing back the blinds and opening up the window and so forth, is the type of architecture there at the windows. And of course, he was a relative by marriage, and he did spend quite a bit of time at the hall. And that Adirondack Life just ran a very nice article on it, and some nice colored pictures and so forth. So that's a little bit of colorful history. Then John took over from his mother after she died. And John was considered to be sort of the pioneer of the Adirondacks. He did a tremendous amount of individual footwork, canoe work, and so forth, all through the Adirondacks. all up around Blue Mountain, over Lake Placid, Tupper Lake, way through to Elizabethtown. And he has a very good account of the various areas that he covered as to the wildlife and the camps that he built, whether they were, and I have a map with a good many of these marked, where he spent time, so forth. He carried on the hall, and at his death, his son Casimir took it over. He had two sons, James and Casimir. He had two other sons who died in infancy. But James and Casimir were the next heirs in line for the hall from John. And James was not interested. James was an architect, and he has quite a few buildings in Utica, and I know there's one in Olean because I just had a man from Crawford and Stearns call me, wanted to know about James Constable, and I said, well, he was an architect. He said, yes, I found one of his buildings in Oneonta or some other towns down there. So I could give him the history on that. Casimir was a tremendous, well, I don't want to call him an engineer, but he was quite a geologist. That was one of his main things. He did all the survey work for the state of Pennsylvania as to their minerals, their coal fields and everything. There's volumes on those. He also was the one who brought the Bessemer process to the United States from Europe. He did one thing which was is quite a piece of work. He made a genealogy of the family from 1066 up to his time, of course. And it's an amazing thing, and I'll just drop this in, that the family name was not Constable, it was DeLacy. And they came over, they were Normans, and they came across with William the Conqueror. They actually came over in 1022. And Sir Robert DeLacy became the Constable of Chester, England. And over a period of time became Sir Robert the Constable, and the first thing you know, they dropped the Z in the middle, and he became Sir Robert Constable. That's how the name evolved. It was D-E, capital L-A-C-I was the original writing on it. And when I was in England 3 or 4 years ago, I visited Chester. And it's a beautiful town. You go to England, you want to go to Chester, it's beautiful. Then Casimir was quite an engineer. He covered, as I say, the state of Pennsylvania, brought the Bessemer process over here. He married his first cousin, which the family didn't approve of, but that's what he did. They never had any children. Oh, pardon me, I didn't say he never had any children. Oh, no, that's right. I'm getting mixed up here. He didn't have any children, but James did. James had John and Elizabeth. That was my father and her sister.
The Bessemer process, that was for steel manufacturing?
Steel manufacturing, yeah. I haven't really, and I would like sometime to really go out and investigate Casimir, because he was really something. The things that he did, and the way, like the big, well, James had the big glass that I showed you, and Casimir did an awful lot of things. And he was well known. He was manager of the Roanoke, an iron place down in Roanoke, Virginia somewhere, and I got a citation in there. He produced pig iron at $3 a ton, and they'd gone through and changed their process and everything, and they really did quite a job on it. He was a very smart man, tremendously smart.
Sounds like it.
Oh yes, I'd like to make a full study of him sometime, find out just what he did cover, because the family didn't keep any of these records on the individual. It's hard. You got to go back and dig them all out. Well, my dad inherited the hall from Casimir's widow, Jenny. And we came up here in
and your dad was?
John, the son of Casimir.
Son of Casimir, okay.
No, wait a minute, no, pardon, son of James.
Son of James, okay.
Get mixed up here.